Folks in North Carolina want transparency. Why did sheriff's deputies shoot and kill a black man while trying to serve a search warrant?
This is how we stop it right now. Let it stop here in Pasquotank County. Let it stop here. We're going to show the rest of the world how we stop it here. Sheriff Wood, come out and talk to us.
And police in Columbus, Ohio, releasing more video from the Ma'Khia Bryant shooting, what the officer saw when he pulled out his weapon and opened fire. We start with NBC News correspondent Ron Allen. He is in Minneapolis for us today. Ron, you're outside the Shiloh Temple International Ministries Church. Tell us about Daunte Wright's funeral there this afternoon.
It was a very emotional service, as you might imagine, Alice, and there was a packed sanctuary and a lot of very fiery, emotional speeches. Of course, at the root of all this, it's a service for a family to say goodbye to their son. But this was also a call to action by civil rights activists from across the country who came here to pay their respects to the family, to support the family, and to essentially continue to elevate this case as the next focal point, if you will, for those who are demanding accountability from police who are involved in the killing of black men. So there were also people here, relatives of George Floyd and others, families who have lost victims, who have lost loved ones, I should say, to police violence. Here's some of what Wright's mother, Katie Wright, had to say about her son's passing, her son's loss.
Junior was the joy of his life, and he lived for him every single day. And now he's not going to be able to see him.
Mostly, Wright was remembered as a doting father. He has a 2-year-old son, Daunte Jr., who actually turned 2 in July. Just a very powerful service. His parents, when they spoke, they almost couldn't speak. It was just so emotional for them because, again, this is a family, an ordinary, typical family from the Minneapolis area who have suddenly been thrust into this national spotlight because of the loss of their son, who was just 20. He has 6 brothers and sisters as well. Just a big family, a big diverse family, I should say, as well. So now everyone who was here is off to the cemetery for burial. But of course, this continues on. There's the officer who has been charged in his murder, facing manslaughter charges, returns to court in a couple of weeks' time. And here in this community, there are many who are demanding that that charge be upgraded to murder, not manslaughter, murder, which is what they say happened that day. Allison?
Ron, you said it. A normal, average Minneapolis area family thrust into the national spotlight reminds us of another family we know, George Floyd's. I understand they were there today. How are those two families coming together in their shared grief and the tragedies that they have been through?
Their shared grief and now their shared passion as well to bring about change. The Floyd family, obviously Daunte Wright was killed during the trial, and the Floyd family immediately rushed to their side, and they have been in solidarity now since Daunte Wright was killed. There's also a connection where George Floyd's girlfriend was a former school teacher of Daunte Wright at some point. This is a very small community in some ways in Minneapolis, and so that gives you a sense of the few degrees of separation, if you will, the interconnections between those two families. There was also relatives of Breonna Taylor here, Philando Castile, and all these events, the protests, the funerals. We see a coming together of these families and their shared grief, but again, their shared determination to bring about change, to change fundamentally the way police interact in communities, interact with residents in communities of color. Allison?
Ron, a question for you about the investigation into the former officer Kim Potter, who has been charged in Wright's death. Any updates, any new information there today?
No, again, the charge at this point is second-degree manslaughter, and many people want this to become a charge of murder. The word murder is very significant versus manslaughter. Manslaughter, the charge carries up to 10 years in prison, so it's not insignificant. But they want at least a second or third degree charge of murder here, because the way the family and their attorneys and others see it is that the crime started when they pulled him over. They think it was a stop that was done, as is often the case, many would argue, as a pretextual stop to try and target and racially profile a young black man driving in a car, to see if there's something else besides these expired license tags, which is what the police said was the problem. Of course, once they stopped him, they found that there were some outstanding warrants for him, misdemeanor warrants. And that's when the scuffle started, broke out as he tried to get away, and the shooting happened then. But of course, still, the family, attorneys, others feel this was a case of murder because they feel like he shouldn't have been stopped in the first place. That the infraction of a expired tag could be handled with a ticket or something like that. And that's at the root of this case, which is why they want a serious charge. And they want the whole interaction to be looked at. And because they say it's the kind of thing that happens very often between police and black residents, black drivers, young black men and women. Allison?
For sure. Ron Allen in Minneapolis at Daunte Wright's funeral today. Thank you so much. In Elizabeth City, North Carolina, authorities are trying to figure out what happened when sheriff's deputies were serving a search warrant and shot and killed Andrew Brown Jr. Protesters there outraged that another black man has died at the hands of police. They want to see the body cam footage of that shooting. NBC News correspondent Katie Beck is in Elizabeth City, North Carolina. Katie, what is the latest on that shooting, and what can you tell us about the victim, Andrew Brown?
Well, what we know is that yesterday morning at about 8:30 in the morning, deputies were serving a search warrant on Andrew Brown just about 50 feet away from where we're standing now in his neighborhood. And at some point that interaction went bad and there was a police-involved shooting, but we really don't know much more than that at this point. We do know that body cam video exists, and the North Carolina Bureau of Investigation is reviewing that video. They're also doing a thorough investigation of everything that led up to that point, but at this point have not released that to the public. So there are strong cries from within the community for not only that footage to be released, but all of the information that is being uncovered right now in this investigation. Still right now, a lot of unanswered questions.
So many questions, as you've said. I understand the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigations is taking over this case. Have they said much so far? What is the latest from them on this?
No, today we have not heard from them. Yesterday there was a press conference, but very limited in the scope that they provided. There really weren't any specifics regarding what transpired between Brown and police and what led up to that shooting. So at this point, there are protests happening. There were about 200 people at a protest last night. There is another organized for tonight. Family members and community members urging protesters to remain peaceful and keep the mission in mind. But at this point, the strong cries within the community are for releasing everything that's going on behind closed doors. And right now, it's been pretty tight-lipped today.
All right,
Yeah, Katie, you mentioned those protesters. We saw so many of them overnight. And it's so sad, right? Because you see the video, you see those protests, and they feel so familiar because we are seeing so many of them around the country. Besides asking for that body cam video, what are you hearing from people there? What are they saying about this happening in their hometown? About another shooting. We've had so many this week alone.
Yeah, I mean, residents have been very measured in their comments to us, basically, not trying to rush to judgment too soon on this, but saying we do deserve to know what happened. We do deserve to see that body cam footage. And that's really what they're asking for right now is transparency and accountability. They want to see what happened factually in this case that led to this unfortunate conclusion. And right now, they simply don't have that information.
All right, Katie Beck in North Carolina, thank you so much. To Ohio and another shooting. 16-year-old Micaiah Bryant's mom still in shock today. Her daughter shot and killed by Columbus police on Tuesday.
I'm still processing this. I'm still mourning. Micaiah was a sweet little girl. She didn't deserve what happened to her.
NBC News Now correspondent Maura Barrett is in Columbus. Maura, Columbus police releasing more body cam footage showing the officer's point of view. What can you tell us about that new video? And I just want to warn our viewers, some of them may find this video disturbing.
Good afternoon, Allison. Yeah, this video that was released less than 24 hours after the incident happened on Tuesday afternoon, just before we heard about the verdict in the Derek Chauvin trial. And it gives us a picture of what exactly went down when the officers arrived on scene. You see him pull up in the police car before getting out of the car, and you see it happens very quickly. The woman, or the young girl, Ma'Khia Bryant, holding a knife, charging towards one female and then towards another, and in that split second, the officer firing 4 shots at her. And this is something that it happened incredibly quickly. 12 minutes arrived after the 911 calls were made. We also received that audio yesterday, and I want you to listen to some of the immediate reaction between the officers and bystanders on scene. And again, it is quite disturbing for our viewers. Here's a peek.
What's going on? Hey, get down, get down, get down, get down.
No!
She had a knife, she just went at her.
She's a kid, man!
And so you can see a knife on the ground in the body cam video after the shooting took place. Ma'Khia Bryant's mother in that interview you just heard from emphasizing that this was out of character for her daughter, and that she actually feels that her daughter was defending herself among these 2 other females who she called grown girls. We don't know the ages or identification of these other women involved, but the family very much angered at the situation this evening, Allison.
Maura, the 911 call was also released. What did you learn there?
So there were 2 911 calls that were released yesterday afternoon. I want you to hear from one of them that police put out, and it's unclear who exactly made the call, but this is what police officers heard when they first got the call.
We got these grown girls over here trying to fight us, trying to stab us, trying to put her hands on our grandma. Get her now!
So again, there was one other call that was made, and we don't know who made these calls, whether it was Ma'Khia Bryant or one of the other females involved. But this was the police responding to what they are calling an attempted knife fight or apparent knife fight, and it came on scene with Ma'Khia Bryant with the knife in her hands as she was interacting with those 2 females there. So clearly a very hectic situation that happened within 20 minutes, Allison.
Yeah. Maura, I understand you've heard from the police union. What are they saying about this?
They're standing by their officer's defense, their choice of firing his weapon. I want you to hear from the police union on what he says about what this body cam video reveals.
With this transparency, the public can see that. As unfortunate as it is, we do not know potentially how many lives could have been lost in addition, or people seriously injured.
At a press conference yesterday, the police chief also standing by his officer as reporters asked why wasn't a taser used, and demonstrators here last night echoed the same concern over why there wasn't an alternative method of dispersal used or if the gun should have been fired anywhere else. The police chief saying their training tells them to follow shooting towards the center mass of the body rather than a smaller target like a leg or an arm, because if there's deadly force being used, like the knife in Ma'Khia Bryant's hand, that's what they're being trained to do. So the police union standing behind the officer this evening.
Well, Maura, a lot of people asking that question tonight, whether that was the right response. We'll see what the investigation shows. Thank you so much, Maura. Really appreciate it. It is called the blue wall of silence, a long-standing belief that police protect their own. But that wall cracked during the Derek Chauvin murder trial with 9 officers testifying against him. So will Chauvin's guilty verdict change police culture and bring down that wall? NBC News correspondent Gabe Gutierrez takes a look.
Before Derek Chauvin was taken away in handcuffs, prosecutors stressed their case was about one police officer.
This is not an anti-police prosecution. It's a pro-police prosecution.
But outside the courtroom, the stakes seem much higher.
Chauvin is in the courtroom, but America is on trial on how it will deal with police accountability.
During Chauvin's trial, a rare sight. Cop after cop after cop testifying against one of their own.
It's just uncalled for.
Including the Minneapolis police chief who'd fired Chauvin.
And it is certainly not part of our ethics or our values.
Was the American policing system on trial here?
I believe it was.
Officer Jeremy Bohannon has been a cop in Austin, Texas for more than a decade.
So seeing that guilty verdict really just a sigh of relief, because everybody felt the same way. And there's a lot of officers in this country that also feel the same way.
In New Jersey, Gabe Rodriguez once worked for Camden City Police Department, which disbanded in 2013.
I think he really steamed all the officers that are out there on a daily basis.
He's now the chief of the Camden County Force that replaced it.
What do you think this trial signified for police departments across the country?
Well, it sends a strong message. You're not above the law, and you will be held accountable like anyone else in that situation, regardless if you wear a badge or not.
Is the blue wall of silence real?
You know, when I first became a police officer, I believe it was real. And I believe that wall is starting to be broken down in different agencies.
Some departments have been trying to break it for years. In New Orleans, a city reeling from a painful history of police killings, officers started a program, Ethical Policing is Courageous, or EPIC. It uses peer pressure to stop misconduct.
We train our police officers to become active bystanders. So if they see a fellow police officer about to make a mistake, about to lose their cool, about to do something stupid, or about to actually commit some form of misconduct, they step up, they say something.
The historic verdict in Minneapolis, now renewing calls for change nationwide.
Let's check in with NBC News Now correspondent Simone Boy. She has the headlines for us from NBCnews.com. Hi, Simone.
Hey, Allison. Today, the Biden administration launching a massive campaign to persuade more Americans to get their COVID vaccine shots. So it's called We Can Do This, and it will target young people through social media, including virtual events where celebrities and athletes will answer questions about the vaccines. Now, the big push comes as recent numbers from Stat News found that more than half of young adults between the ages of 18 to 24 would either not get vaccinated or would wait a while and see how things turn out before making a decision. And continuing on the COVID vaccine front, the European Commission is working on legal proceedings against AstraZeneca after the drug maker cut COVID-19 vaccine deliveries to the EU, which contributed to delays in Europe's vaccine rollout. Two diplomats saying that most EU states supported the legal action against the company. A spokesman for AstraZeneca saying the company was not aware of any legal proceedings and, quote, continues to hold regular discussions on supply with the Commission. And in some more coronavirus news, India reporting a global record of more than 314,000 new infections in the past 24 hours as a COVID surge devastates the world's second most populated country. India's total cases now passing 15.9 million since the pandemic began. A large number of hospitals saying they're facing bed and medicine shortages and running on dangerously low levels of oxygen. And authorities saying oxygen in that missing Indonesian submarine will run out by Saturday. The underwater craft is believed to have sunk at least 2,000 feet during a training exercise. That is well below its design depth of just 656 feet. Rescuers say they found an unidentified object with high magnetism in the area, and officials are hoping that that is the submarine. Well, Star Trek actor LeVar Burton will be among the final group of Jeopardy guest hosts, thanks in part to more than 200,000 people who signed an online petition for him to get the role. The petition saying Burton has, quote, inspired and shaped the minds of several generations of trivia-loving nerds. The air dates have not been announced yet, however. And I just have to add that he has shaped the minds of millions of fans around the world, particularly with his show Reading Rainbow. I don't know if anybody remembers that. I just aged myself and dated myself, but he was so good on that show. Such a great part of my childhood.
Can I just say, Simone, I owe you a huge thank you because you're talking Star Trek, and in my head I'm thinking, singing rather, take a look, it's in a book. Like, he's my Reading Rainbow guy. Thank you for not making me feel like the only person. Yes! What a great show. Oh, I'm psyched to see him on Jeopardy. That's real cool, Simone.
For sure. Thanks, Allison.
The signs are unmistakable. The science is undeniable. But the cost of inaction keeps mounting. The United States isn't waiting. We are resolving to take action.
President Biden pledging to cut America's greenhouse gas emissions in half by the end of the decade. The White House is hosting a virtual climate summit with world leaders today. NBCNews.com senior White House reporter Shannon Pettypiece joining me now. Shannon, the president calling this a moment of peril, but a moment of opportunity. What other climate goals is the president setting for the United States?
Well, this is a pretty lofty one, this goal to cut emissions in half by the end of the decade. It is one that environmental groups have been pushing the White House and the administration to make. And of course, there's some environmental groups who wanted them to go even further. But it is relatively in line with what a number of other developed countries are doing. And here's a little bit more about what President Biden had to say at this summit today.
But the truth is, America represents less than 15% of the world's emissions. No nation can solve this crisis on our own, as I know you all fully understand. All of us, and particularly those of us who represent the world's largest economies, we have to step up. Those that do take action and make bold investments in their people and clean energy future will win the good jobs of tomorrow and make their economies more resilient and more competitive. So let's run that race.
And I would note, Allison, that just the U.S. having this summit is notable. Obviously, there was 4 years under the Trump administration where the U.S. really pulled back and withdrew from climate efforts. And now this is the White House and this president showing that not only is the U.S. back and going to have a seat at the table, but it's going to try and take a real leadership role on this issue.
So I hate to always be this guy, Shannon, but I have to ask the question, how's the White House planning to pay for all of these plans, and what happens if Congress isn't on board?
Right. Well, a big part of this $2 trillion infrastructure bill that the president is proposing would help fund clean energy, particularly electric vehicles and building out the electric vehicle grid. Republicans made a counter proposal to that today that is much lower and strips out a lot of those green energy initiatives. Here's what Press Secretary Jen Psaki had to say earlier today about this issue.
I think our collective view here is that it is not the United States is a major emitter in the world. We're not the only emitter, and that in order to address the climate crisis, we need to work with developing countries to ensure they have the resources to help meet those obligations. That's certainly the proposal and the pitch we would be making. We're not saying it's going to be easy.
So expect a lot of back and forth for weeks, if not months, between Democrats and Republicans as they try and figure out how to pay for some of these initiatives the president's calling for.
All right, Shannon Pettypiece with the latest from the White House on Earth Day. Thank you so much. How do you prevent a city from running out of water? Engineers in Los Angeles think they have an idea. NBC News correspondent Jacob Soboroff got an inside look at the city's ambitious plans to recycle all of LA's wastewater by 2035. That's right, I said wastewater. It's part of NBC's Climate Challenge Week.
Allison, this is the Los Angeles Aqueduct Cascades. I'm at the very top of it. I've never been here before in my life, even though I'm an LA native and an LA resident. And really, it's a modern engineering marvel. The city of LA wouldn't be what it is if it wasn't for the hundreds of billions of gallons of water that this city imports right here from hundreds of miles away every single year. And honestly, that's part of the problem. Those water sources in particular, the Colorado River is drying up, and we buy that water through a organization, an entity called the Metropolitan Water District. LA knows that, and in the face of climate change, they have a plan to become water independent by 2035. It involves LA residents like me being comfortable drinking some of their old toilet water.
It's straight up, and straight back, and straight forward. Just like that. There you go.
Okay.
Angler Lino Jubilato's been fly fishing here for over 30 years, and he invited me to join him.
You're a natural.
This is
You're
amazing.
A natural.
Soaking your line in the Los Angeles River makes you almost forget where you are. A former concrete drainage ditch next to an interstate.
The 5 freeway. You can hear it.
Yeah.
You know?
It sounds like the rushing river, actually.
While it doesn't often rush, the river's restoration was made possible by clean water from a local source.
There hasn't been any rain, so basically all this water that's coming in right now from treatment plants.
That's where it's coming from.
It's all from the treatment plants.
As in wastewater treatment plants. Toilet water.
You're lucky this is not smell-o-vision.
Michael Ruiz runs LA's Tillman Water Reclamation Plant, one of the main sources of LA river water.
So, Mike, what is it exactly?
In a scientific term, it's called mixed liquor suspended solids.
Mixed liquor suspended solids.
Yes.
Sounds pretty gross, but Mike and the city are able to treat all this sewage so it's clean enough to release into the river. But most of it doesn't end up there or anywhere for people to enjoy. Dolphins, on the other hand?
We're on our way out 5 miles into the Pacific Ocean to see where the city of Los Angeles is currently discharging hundreds of millions of gallons of treated wastewater every single day. Whoa!
These LA City scientists want to change that, and they're part of an ambitious plan to recycle all of LA's wastewater by 2035.
Given climate change, this is a pretty critical infrastructure project.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So we're wasting less when it can be reused for other things.
Those other things include turning the treated wastewater being discharged from this pipe on the ocean floor into drinking water. LA Mayor Eric Garcetti couldn't be more confident in his city's plan to protect LA's water supply from climate change.
There it is, the smell.
By going toilet to tap, or showers to flowers, as he likes to call it.
Yesterday, we went 5 miles directly out that way to where this facility is pumping 250 million gallons of wastewater, treated, every day out into the Pacific.
We think by 2035, we can take about 216 million of those 250 million gallons. Instead of piping it that way, we'll be piping it back this way.
But first, he'll have to convince any squeamish LA residents.
Just want to be super clear that by 2035, the 4 million residents of the city hopefully will be drinking this stuff that started hours ago in our homes and showers and toilets.
Absolutely. You'll have the sweetest, cleanest, clearest water, and it's going to be right here from LA.
Garcetti's 2035 plan is already in motion at a different LA treatment plant called Terminal Island, where they use advanced technology.
You see all these?
Fernando Gonzalez, the plant manager there, offered me a taste.
This is the water that started how many hours ago as somebody's toilet water?
About a day.
About a day ago.
The entire process about a day.
So about a day ago, what I flushed down my toilet has ended up with this.
Yeah. That's it.
That is delicious. That's good. Allison, it truly was delicious, and I'd recommend everybody try it and not be afraid of it. It really is a taste of the future. LA hopes to cut in half our importation of water from around California, stop entirely our purchasing of water from outside of LA by 2035. It would be a remarkable feat and a huge step at mitigating the impacts of climate change on our most precious resource here in Los Angeles.
On Capitol Hill, the House advancing a bill to make D.C. the 51st state, and in the Senate, Republicans introducing a counteroffer to President Biden's infrastructure plan. Here's NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Garrett Haake.
Hey, Allison, two big moves on two big pieces of legislation today. First, over here on the Senate side, a group of Senate Republicans finally released their counteroffer, starting place for negotiations with the White House on infrastructure. This clocks in at only about $600 billion. That's less than a third of the spending in the Biden infrastructure package, and it only focuses on so-called hard infrastructure, things like roads and bridges and waterways, a little bit of money for broadband. Democrats are already panning this proposal. They say it doesn't meet the moment. It doesn't spend enough even on those priorities, and it doesn't get into some of the other priorities beyond, quote unquote, traditional infrastructure that Democrats would like to see in a package. So as a starting point for negotiations, this gives us something to work with here, where you've got Republicans now kind of on the record about what they would like to support in the Senate, and we'll see whether there's a good faith negotiation here with the White House or whether this tells Democrats they've got to go their own way on reconciliation. Now, from the Department of Things You Can't Get Done Through Reconciliation, the House voted today on D.C. statehood measure to make the District of Columbia the 51st state. This passed on a party line vote in the House, much like it did in the last Congress. It now moves to the Senate, but I have to tell you, this bill has almost no chance of becoming law in the Senate. It would be filibustered by Republicans, even if you got rid of the filibuster. It's not clear that there are 50 votes for D.C. statehood. There are Democrats who say they are in favor of D.C. statehood, but they don't really want to put a lot of their own political capital on the line to do it. And it's sort of low on the overall priority list for the majority of senators who represent states that are already states. So with that, the Congress heads out. It's a flyout day. They are gone for the weekend here. And when we come back, we'll see whether there's more progress to be made on a police reform bill.
Will the Johnson & Johnson COVID vaccine be back in action before the week is over? A CDC panel meeting tomorrow about the pause in the J&J shot. Today, anchor Savannah Guthrie talked to CDC Director Dr. Rochelle Walensky this morning and asked her about that meeting right off the bat.
Good morning, Savannah. Glad to be with you.
Let's talk about the J&J vaccine first, because tomorrow that advisory panel meets. Do you expect the J&J vaccine to resume in this country, and how soon, if so?
It's a really good question. I don't want to get ahead of the advisory committee tomorrow's meeting. They're meeting from 11 to 5, and they will see data on the new cases that may have come in since the 6 cases that were initially reported. They're also going to review data that we will be providing them on the risk and benefit analysis, the benefits of having a J&J vaccine versus the very, very rare events that we have detected. So I will look to their guidance. I believe it's really important to make a swift decision, as I believe does the FDA. So we'll see what they have to say, and we'll be forward with a guidance soon thereafter.
Just one thing real quickly. I mean, European regulators have already resumed J&J or recommended resuming J&J in Europe. Do you feel an urgency here?
Yes, I do. We need to make a decision quickly, and I'm really hopeful that we'll be able to use the vaccine soon.
All right, let's talk about the vaccine rollout. We hit a major milestone, 200 million shots in arms. 25% of the country is vaccinated. That's the good news. But the experts are warning now that we are about to hit this moment where demand is no longer outstripping supply. In other words, you're going to have people who don't really want the vaccine, and you've got about half the population vaccinated at that point. So what is the plan to try to get the other half of the country vaccinated? I almost think about it as a race where the last half of the marathon is all uphill.
Yeah, you know, we've been planning for this. We knew at some point, and I would consider it good news, that we have enough vaccine out there and it's accessible enough. We have vaccine now within 5 miles of 90% of Americans, and we knew we were going to hit this point. We thought it would be around the late part of April, and here we are. And now comes the hard work of working with our community core, trying to understand why people might be hesitant. Is it the science that they feel was rushed? We know 100,000 people were enrolled in these clinical trials for these vaccines. Is it that they just haven't reached messaging from a trusted messenger? So that's the work that we have ongoing. That's the work that we're doing, and we know we have it ahead.
And the goal here is, of course, herd immunity, and experts differ about at what point we reach herd immunity. It's 70% of the population, 80%, 90%, whatever it is. The goal is if you have herd immunity, then the virus can't continue to spread and mutate, which, of course, poses a big danger. Do you have any concern that we simply won't be able to achieve herd immunity in this country?
You know, this value of herd immunity is very much dependent on how transmissible the virus is, and with these variants, that may in fact be a moving target. Here's what I do know. I know the more the population gets vaccinated, the more people we have vaccinated, the less transmission will happen. And so I'm rather looking toward a singular numerical target. My job now is to make sure that every American knows that this vaccine is available to them, that it is safe, that it is effective, and that they should go and get vaccinated.
Well, let me pick up on that, because that issue of transmission, whether vaccinated people can nevertheless still transmit the virus, is one of the big open questions of the pandemic right now. And it's a key one. That's why vaccinated people are still wearing masks, because we just don't know if they're able to transmit the virus. So my question is, what is the science telling you now? I know the CDC and researchers are studying it. When might we have an answer? It seems like a particularly key question.
It is a really important question that we're following. And there are numerous studies now that are starting to emerge that give us important data. So we know that the vaccine in real world studies is somewhere between 85–95% effective. And some of the questions are, does that mean that that you're not getting sick or you're not getting the virus? And people, the MMWR released data about a month ago that demonstrated that with screening, we're actually finding that people are not getting the virus at all. So what about those people who are breakthrough, who do get the virus? And increasingly, data suggests that about a third of them, even if they get the virus, are completely asymptomatic, and many of them have such low virus that they can't transmit to others. Now, we still need more data in this area, but increasingly we're getting more and more data that suggests that even those breakthrough infections may be less symptomatic and less likely to transmit.
Which is good news, but just to bottom line it, when might you really have a definitive answer so you could tell people, hey, if you have the vaccine, you don't really need to wear that mask anymore?
Well, you know, what I will say is no vaccine is perfect. And so ultimately, this is going to be a matter of risk. But what I can say is a 95% effective vaccine is extraordinarily effective. If we can have a 95% effective vaccine and we can get our caseloads down, then we'll be in really good shape as a country.
And then real quickly, there's a growing debate now about to mask or not to mask when you're outside. I looked at the CDC guidance this morning, and forgive me, I choose this word carefully, it's a little mushy. Do you think that if you are outside and not close to people, you still need to wear a mask?
You know, this is a question that we're looking at. One of the things I think that's really important to understand is while there's wonderful news and we're getting more and more people vaccinated every single day, we still had 57,000 cases of COVID yesterday. We still had 733 deaths. And so while we are really trying to scale up vaccination, we have this complex message that we still have hotspots in this country. And we will be looking at the outdoor masking question, but it's also in the context of the fact that we still have people who are dying of COVID.
And really quickly, and I understand this is really complicated, but if people are getting vaccinated, but they still have to wear masks, they're outside in the fresh air and the warm weather, but the CDC is still saying, well, you should probably wear your mask. What's the incentive? I mean, isn't part of this sort of a reward thing where do the right thing and you'll be rewarded? Do you balance that at all when you're making these decisions about the guidance that you give?
We absolutely do. And as we look at this guidance to revive the guidance of what you can do when you're vaccinated, that will be easier and easier to do as more and more people get vaccinated. CDC. Absolutely.
The labor market looking up with jobless claims down again this week. 547,000 Americans filed for first-time unemployment benefits last week. That's the lowest they've been during the pandemic. NBC News senior business correspondent Steph Rule has more on those numbers and our economy.
Hey there, Allison. It's Thursday, so you know that means I'm going to be here to talk jobless claims. Well, we've got good news on the economic recovery front. For the second week in a row, we have seen weekly jobless claims go down, 547,000. That's a very positive sign. We are getting to the early pandemic times. Now, we're not at pre-pandemic levels yet, but we are seeing hiring across the board. We're even seeing hiring with some issues, especially in the service industry, where we're talking to employers who are saying they're struggling to get people to come back to work. Many small businesses, restaurants, florists, others in the service industry are slowly looking to bring employees back, some on a part-time basis. And that's caused somewhat of a hiccup. Because right now, people are getting full unemployment. That means unemployment benefits for full-time jobs. We don't yet offer part-time unemployment, and that's keeping some people from going back to work part-time. And it's why many employers out there are now offering more incentives. We're hearing about job incentives from companies like Uber. Some pizza restaurants are offering bonuses, and more big companies like Amazon and Walmart are converting part-time work to full-time work. Full-time work, that comes with benefits. So we are definitely seeing positive trends on the job front, and we're likely going to see positive trends in terms of wage growth. That's good news.
China behind a new series of hacks targeting the U.S. government, private companies, and the country's critical infrastructure, cybersecurity firm Mandiant says. NBCNews.com reporter Kevin Collier joins me now. Kevin, what do you know about the hack, and how many people could be affected here?
Well, it's still very early, but this is the third major successful cyber espionage campaign against the United States that we've learned about in just the past 5 months. And the second of them that's believed to be from China. They got in through a previously undisclosed software vulnerability in Pulse Secure, which is it's a popular program that lets workers remotely connect to their company's home network. We don't have firm numbers yet of how many people can be affected or the actual identities of the victims. But at least as of yesterday, we know that the hackers were still in a number of extremely sensitive systems, including federal agencies, plural, and like you said, critical infrastructure, and some large financial companies and defense companies.
So, Kevin, I know it's really early stages of this, but what should you do if you think you might be compromised here?
Well, anybody who uses PulseSecure should head to CISA's website. It's the main federal cybersecurity defender. They have a tool to see if you've been affected. You can't simply update the software just on its own. It's because this is so fresh. It's going to be a couple weeks before the software manufacturer has an update ready that will automatically close the door that's letting the hackers in.
Kevin, you mentioned CISA, and we're looking at an emergency directive that they just put out. It is the second time in 7 weeks that CISA's come out with an emergency warning. And usually those warnings are pretty rare. What is going on here? And does the U.S. government understand or know why China is upping its cyber attacks right now?
Well, so this is, like you said, this is the second major all hands on deck warning that we've gotten from the federal government in just 7 weeks. And that makes it look like this is a fast-paced, relentless barrage. The reality is that China was in these systems for months. We're only just now learning about it. Researchers I've talked to have evidence that it's been going on since at least last summer, probably since 2019. So really what this is, kind of bigger picture, is evidence that China, or allegedly China, and they have some of the most advanced cyber spying capabilities in the world. And they're following their intelligence goals and keeping tabs on America, and they're very good. Our cybersecurity defenders are scrambling to keep putting out these fires. I talked last night with CISA's Deputy Executive Assistant Director of Cybersecurity, Matt Hartman, and he said, yes, these campaigns are extremely serious, extremely sophisticated, and it's really taxing our defenses.
Scary stuff, and even scarier that we don't have all of that many details just yet. Kevin, thanks for coming on today to tell us what we do know so far.
Thanks, Allison.
Happy Earth Day, everybody. Sadly, this blue dot in the universe that we call home is getting hotter and hotter each year. Today's show co-host Al Roker looks at how far we have come in the fight against climate change and how far we still need to go as part of NBC's Climate Challenge Week.
2 degrees Celsius. This is the goal of the Paris Climate Agreement, to keep the average global temperature from warming more than 2 degrees above pre-industrial levels. It's been about 200 years since the Industrial Revolution. In that time, ever-increasing amounts of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere have helped heat the Earth more than halfway to that point. Let's take a closer look at the last 100 years. From 1920 to 1980, the global temperatures climbed about 0.4 of a degree Celsius. After 1980, that pace more than doubled. In just 40 years, the temperatures have climbed another 0.7 of a degree. In 3 of the last 5 years, temperatures have crossed the 1.2 degree mark. Last year, we reached 1.27 degrees Celsius above late 19th century temperatures. We're dangerously accelerating toward that 2 degrees. And this is only a global average. Many locations around the planet have seen temperatures soar to much higher levels. Large parts of Europe, Greenland, Alaska, and Russia, including Siberia, have already surpassed 2 degrees. And up north, above the Arctic Circle, the warming is over 4 degrees. That extra heat concentrated in the Arctic, well, that's causing a massive melt of polar ice, and it's only getting worse. On average, 14,000 tons of water melt from the Arctic every second. That's more than 4 times the amount of water that goes over Niagara Falls each second. If we stay on our course over the last 10 years, the Earth could hit the 2 degree mark as soon as 2040, and possibly up to 3 degrees by 2060. Only a significant reduction in carbon dioxide emissions quickly will make the Paris goal a reality. Climate scientists say surpassing that milestone will result in more frequent deadly heat waves, drought, and wildfires, making large areas of our planet uninhabitable. And sea levels are, quote, very likely to rise a foot by the end of the century and could rise by even as much as 8 feet. That will likely make hurricanes more powerful, specifically unleashing flooding connected with dangerous storm surges, impacting hundreds of millions of people who live in coastal areas. Our road to 2 degrees is shortening. The time to act now.
I don't represent any financial or political interests. I'm not a lobbyist, so I can't negotiate, make deals, or compromise. I have nothing to offer you, nor am I a scientist. All I can do is to urge you to listen to and act on the science and to use your common sense.
Greta Thunberg joining in a House Environmental Subcommittee hearing this morning, the teen environmental activist inspiring millions of young people to stand up and speak out about climate change. NBC's Kelly Kobiea talked with some of those young activists about their fight for the future of our planet.
You see it across the globe. From Africa to Asia, Europe to America. Young climate activists demanding action.
What do you want? Climate justice! When do we want it? Now!
In India, it's the first protest for twin sisters Ashir and Asis Kandari in almost a year. Like so many places around the world, the pandemic has put mass gatherings on hold in New Delhi. That hasn't stopped these sisters.
We are here to stay, and we are going to keep on fighting until we get our right to breathe and our right for clean air.
They're fighting the expansion of a metro line and trying to save thousands of trees.
Living in a country like India, you don't need to get introduced to it. You step out of your house and you feel the direct, effects of pollution, air pollution. And the thing is that you get severe heat waves. This was the hottest winter, and that the coming summer is going to be much more hot than the last time. And it's just a cycle that continues year after year.
How do you push things forward? How do you make change happen, do you think?
I think it's taking it day by day. You go in with local goals. You can't tackle climate crisis with big ambitions. You need to try solving the problems around you.
Local activism taking hold in the Netherlands, too, where Lily Platt, just 13, is fighting plastic.
I couldn't just stand and watch this world just become a polluted wasteland, but I had to somehow find a way to preserve it for every generation to come.
Lily is a veteran campaigner. She's given a TED Talk, rallied outside European Parliament, and taken part in school strikes. Like so many young activists, inspired by Greta Thunberg. Lily met her 3 years ago.
I was just thinking, oh my gosh, she's here. What should I ask her? I asked her this question, and it was, what do you think is the worst element of climate change or the most dangerous one? And she replied with, well, they're all dangerous.
Can one person have an impact?
That's true, because no matter how small it may seem, eventually it will become such a huge impact that people will somehow find a way to listen.
Thousands of miles away in Nigeria, the same problem. 19-year-old law student Uluwesi Moesho's answer? A 2-day literathon last fall, spanning 18 cities in 7 African countries.
Planet is suffering from the impacts of plastic pollution. I've come to realize that plastic pollution and climate change has an intersection such that the production of plastics releases millions of carbon emissions into the atmosphere, which contributes to climate change. So all this collectively makes me to keep on discovering, creating and implementing solutions focused on mitigating climate change and plastic pollution here in Africa.
In southern Thailand, Kairia Ramanya is fighting to protect her village and a 15-mile-long pristine coastline. The government wants to build a multi-billion-dollar industrial zone, endangering not just the environment, but a way of life.
If the project happens, the beach will disappear. We will lose our land and access to the sea and won't be able to continue fishing. It's not only about fishermen, it means every living thing in this area. Air, human, crops, fruits, and natural resources will all be affected. We don't want any development that destroys natural resources.
Kairia's letter to the Prime Minister last May, pleading for the project to be scrapped, went viral on Twitter. She and the local children put on plays to highlight the plight of their village, and it worked. The government put the project under review.
School Strike for Climate has arrived in America.
When Greta's strikes spread globally 2 years ago, Alexandria Villasenor organized thousands of teens in New York City. I met her back then.
If enough youth keep striking and going out to the streets, having civil disobedience, we'll get the action that's needed.
Alexandria skipped school every Friday until the pandemic hit. Now, she's taken the movement online, where it's catching fire.
What began
Fighting for the climate is cool.
Every single day that I go on social media, I see another youth activist, and I'm like, well, follow them. And there's just so many people out there who are in this movement that I just hear more about them every day.
This army of young activists, climate activists around the world, and it's not the case with you. I mean, you went from 13 to 15, you're still so involved. Why do you think this is sticking?
Because we are on such a tight deadline. We have less than, 9 years now to take action on the climate crisis.
Scientists warn that global emissions have to be halved by 2030 to avoid a climate catastrophe. British teenager Maya Craig took her message to the Arctic last year.
I was actually really angry on that trip because I could see the Arctic melting, the ice floes melting, the sort of glaciers falling apart.
She started a charity to bring more teens from ethnic minority backgrounds into the climate movement. We joined her and her volunteers planting oak trees.
I truly believe that people have no reason to care about the environmental crisis if they've never really spent time in the countryside. So I think building those relationships are really important.
Dedicated and passionate minds from different backgrounds and countries with a common goal: to save their future. Kelly Kobiella, NBC News, London.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.